His topic is megatrends in the lubrication segment. Please proceed to your presentation. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. So my name is Mikael Kruse. I'm going to have you know a little bit about megatrends and how they affect the lubrication business. So let's get started. So, as you know, we have several megatrends out in the world that do affect us everywhere. And the one I've selected here are probably known by you. We have technology, we have sustainability, instability, demography, and urbanization. So pretty wide topics, basically. But you can boil them down a little bit further to see that under technology, you see AI, of course, everywhere, automation, robots, digitalization and connectivity, and so on for these different topics, basically. So basically, this is what's going on in the world that affects everything. So what I want to take a look at, how is this affecting the lubrication industry, right? Because that's our industry. That's important for us. Because regardless if we like it or not, this is going to have an effect on us, right? So we need to adapt, we need to adjust. If we don't, we're going to have a problem. So we need to push the button for change to some extent to be able to act towards these megatrends. So let's start here first with the technology trend. I've picked some pieces out here, and you're probably aware about AIs taking place everywhere. We have the ChatGPT, we have Microsoft and their, softwares implementing it in all kind of systems that you can take advantage of now. But we also have it in the industry. You can use it for development purposes, etc., etc. So this is going to take a larger share of our reality in many different stages, basically. That's going to have an effect on other topics, and we don't know yet really everything, right? But if we talk about stuff like total cost of ownership, TCO, we expect that that's going to be a bigger share forward on out in the industry on the end user side, because it's going to require tailor-made lubrication to improve your total cost of ownership, because the grease is the cheapest component in a factory, for instance. The bearing is more costly, the man hours to serve that machine is more costly, the machine itself is very much more costly, and if we talk about maintenance intervals and unplanned stops, that's extremely costly. So investing in a grease that is a couple of euros or what the currency now might be is a good investment, because it affects so much higher values in the chain afterwards. So we expect that to take a larger share, and part of this also relates to automation, digitalization, and connectivity of machinery, because this allows the maintenance department to do their job more properly. They don't need to go and check everything all the time. They can have it directly connected and automated. And this means that condition monitoring and predictive maintenance is going to be more common than it was before. So what does that mean for us then, right? Well, we're going to have new and exciting opportunities for greases, right? It's not going to be, the standard lithium EP2 everywhere. People are going to want to have some different greases, because that's going to elevate their TCO. And that means that we're going to see higher demand on and higher focus on grease lubricating performance. So that's what we expect. It's going to be more difficult, of course, but the earnings is going to be better. So moving on. Sustainability, also a huge trend out there. And if we look at the effect on the industry and the society, we see that we're probably going to see higher focus on raw materials and friction losses. Raw materials because we don't want to have pollutants and toxicants enter our bodies and our nature, but also friction losses. It's all about saving energy. Energy costs money and you don't want to pay too much, right? So we have many different points coming from this. The CSRD, Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, is expected to influence operation and organizational needs to a higher extent. That means that we as manufacturers and in the industry need to have a little bit of more knowledge. We might need to have an expert, not only on HSE and development, we might need to have a sustainability expert as well, if you want to be competitive and attractive for our customers, right? So we need to see and understand that a proactive and progressive approach to long-term business, that's probably going to be expected, or at least for the biggest customers, and that's going to trickle down by time. Because stakeholders, they're going to never shy away from profit, right? That drives everything, but it's more and more focus on the people and the planet as well as profit. So that's the three main things in sustainability: profit, people, planet. And profit and people is planet and people is catching up to some extent. So this means that for us, it's increasingly important to understand how grease can affect sustainability in different situations. I mean, if we have a total loss application, like on a tractor or something, or on top of the ship, we know it's total loss and everything's going to end up in the water and the soil. So the sustainability is basically dependent on the biodegradability of the grease, right? And the non-toxicity. But if it sits in an electric motor, the carbon footprint isn't that important. Toxicity isn't that important either, because it sits there and it does its job for a very long time. So the only thing of importance in that situation is basically the ability of lower friction, because that's going to save energy, which is then the big value on the sustainability. So it's very dependent on the type of application you're serving, what type of sustainability value you need to address. So total loss means biodegradable products. If it's a one-time lubricated bearing, it's going to be friction reduction that's important. You're not going to have vegetable oils and esters and stuff like that. You're going to need the low friction for a long time, so long life at the grease. So we've seen this already for a few years, and it becomes more and more important that sustainability is a purchasing decision for our customers. It's not just something they're interested in. They ask this because they want to push those values forward towards their customers. They need to show progress on this as well. Moving on, in the interest of saving time a bit. So this is perhaps the saddest megatrend, the instability we have in the world. We see that companies are forced to have less fragile and simpler supply chains. The globalization is to some extent reversed a bit. It's more challenging to assure that you get your material in time, in full, to be able to serve your customers in time. So companies are trying to do their best to have more robust supply chains nowadays. This also means that we have a higher focus on company input costs and risk management process. We need to spend some time to understand, is it dangerous to have this kind of process and this kind of supply line or not? Do we want to risk it? So there's a lot more considerations going on risk management than it was like 5, 10 years ago. We see also kind of a watershedding thing going on. We see that some companies are trying to take the moral high ground, where they try to value their supply in moral, ethical, and sustainable values, while others are just trying to get as much money as possible. And that is increasingly difficult to maneuver on. And you can't basically do both, because if your customers find that out, you're in trouble. We also see that changes on classification of raw materials keep on increasing. More and more countries are doing their own directives when it comes to chemical classifications. So as a manufacturer, we have to adapt our formulations to a more and more difficult and complex situation. Of course, there are some similarities between all these classifications. I'm talking about REACH and TSCA and AICS in Australia and Korea, Japan, but there are more countries coming on with their new legislations as well. So it's quite a challenge to have a global product nowadays. So the effect on our industry is that stability of suppliers and the relation to customers is more and more important, because when you have an unstable situation, you want to have a good connection. You want to be able to trust on your supplier, and that means you to your customers, etc. So there is an increasing challenge to choose raw materials that is suitable for all customers and regions, and that depends on the classification as well on the economy and moral, sustainable and ethical values. Some companies don't accept that you source raw materials from a certain country or region, for instance, for ethical reasons. So, demography. We're getting older, and in some companies, our company is fairly old in employment age, and it's more and more difficult to find people. In some countries, the age pyramid isn't nicely pyramidic shaped anymore. It's a little bit different. So it's increasingly problematic, at least for a niche industry like lubricants and greases especially, how to get and keep employees. We need to value our knowledge, because it's not a free pool to pour from. It's very hard to get people into our grease industry. So we need to be able to maintain knowledge and contacts to a high degree. This changing age in different societies means that we have more elder, and they have different needs. They are susceptible to different marketing strategies, and they require, to some extent, different products. They're not going to breeze around on mopeds and skateboards. They have different needs, right? And we also see that when societies develop, we see changing community patterns and way to work, also as a result of employees having different demands now on employers. That, okay, I can work for you, but I have to work 50% from home, right? Stuff like that. So the effect on us means that the grease lubrication knowledge is increasing the competitive edge, because people retire, and that's knowledgeable people. and they're kind of hard to replace, and it's difficult to build knowledge up again. So having that knowledge is definitely a competitive edge nowadays. We also need to understand that a higher flexibility in supplying emerging segments and new customer types might be of need. And that also ties in with the next mega trend, which is urbanization. And here we see that more and more business and people need to be served in selected areas. We see that bigger cities are growing, even medium cities are growing on the expense of the countryside, for instance. And in many regions we see expansion of the middle class. The middle class have different lubrication needs compared to the worker class and the farmers, for instance. This means that some of the urban lubrication demands will increase, and also energy is needed because people living on the countryside in the farmlands, they don't consume very much energy. But when you head into middle class, move into cities, the tendency that you consume much more. And that means a bigger energy industry that has its needs for lubrication as well. So this means that developing regions can be expected to require new and improved greases. So in the case you have a country that's developing fast, and previously they ordered a lot of simple lithium EP2 greases, they're going to have different requirements pretty soon. They're going to try to use lithium EP2 greases. But if you want to reap the benefits of modern greases, they're going to have different needs. So greases for urban segments will take a larger market share by time as people move into cities. So just to summarize a little bit of information on our company. So we're a global grease manufacturer with 6 plants. We're serving most industrial and automotive applications. We have a large range of biodegradable and food-grade greases, and we have a knowledgeable team with experience collected over 100 years, struggling to keep that knowledge in place, but still in a good position. And we have a very strong partnership with suppliers and customers. So by that, trying to address our strength in relation to these megatrends. And if you want to get in contact with me, I'm having a booth in the middle at Axel, so we can come and have a chat, get my card, etc. So in the case you have any questions, feel free to shoot.
Thank you, Mikael. Are there any questions from the floor? Can we pull up the Slido, please? While we're waiting for questions from the audience, I have a few questions. So, in terms of the shift to electric vehicles, especially in Europe and in China, and more slowly in North America, what has been the impact of EVs on grease demand? So basically, because of lithium being used in EV batteries, suddenly the grease industry has been shifting away from lithium grease. What's the other impact? I mean, demand for grease seems to be heightened. There's so much expansion going on in the grease area right now. Are EVs really spurring demand, or is it something else?
Well, the grease industry has been very stable for a very long time, both in terms of product type and composition. So lithium greases has had a market share of 50%, and then you add 20% of lithium complex on top of that. And that has been, you know, basically something we've seen for 80 years or something. Okay, then the lithium got more costly, right? And what everybody found out to be a nice product suddenly costs a lot. They didn't like that. So it pressured us manufacturers to find for other alternatives, right? And because we weren't valued by our suppliers to the same extent either, because we went from a market share of 30%, buying all the lithium, 30%, we're heading fast down to 3%. So they don't care about us as much anymore. So many producers didn't even get this key raw material. So that means that companies had to act on that, right? Need to find different thickeners. So suddenly there's a reason and a drive for something to happen in the grease industry. And I'm kind of happy about that because there's a lot of underutilized technologies, which is very good in several situations that could be used even though lithium has always been there, right? So I would say that has changed the situation a lot. I don't see the electrical vehicles being a huge driver because, I mean, ICE cars also had greases in them, right? Electric cars, they have greases in them. A little bit more, but not very much, right? And we're talking about perhaps going from 1.5 kilos up to 2 kilos of grease per car. And some of the applications are still the same. I mean, the wheel bearings, steering column, the window elevators, etc., and the old undercarriage. So it's the electrical motors, but it's an electrical motor, and electrical motors we have everywhere, right? To some extent, there's a new need for these electrical motors depending on their speed and temperature. So, yeah. We're going to see, we don't have the specification set yet. People don't know what kind of tests to do and what to set the specifications. So it is a young area, I would say. It's hard to tell for sure.
Second question. So you spoke about sustainability.
Yes.
So, of course, when we talk about grease, you have the thickeners, but you also have the base oil. How has that shifted base oil usage? Are you more into certain types of base oils because of the drive towards sustainability, especially in Europe?
Yeah, I would say that, and sustainability is a little bit of tough subject, right? Because if you have something that degrades fast on a farm, that's good in that situation, right? When everything ends up on the soil or in the water. But if it sits in an electrical motor, for instance, it doesn't carry any value that it degrades in the electrical motor. It's going to last there for the duration of the bearing, and then they're going to change everything, right? So there, it's lowering the friction that gives the sustainability. So if you think about the different type of applications, you're going to have to aim for different sustainability values, like total loss, biodegradability, toxicity, and here we see increased utilization of esters, vegetable oils, on the expense of mineral oils, right? If you go into these high volume applications like the steel industry, that one plant might consume 50 to 100 tons per year. There, the big value is that if you can reduce consumption to, let's say, 80%, you're going to save 20 tons of product, right? So their carbon footprint makes sense. Yeah. And but you're still going to be able to collect everything, right? It's inside, so you can do that. But if you think about these, lubricated for life or very infrequently, it's all about friction reduction, and that's a very many different types of applications. And then we have to look at, oils, additives that make the grease last for a long time and reduce friction. So it might go into the synthetic area instead, or polyalpha-olefin/ester, etc. Yeah.
It's very complicated and a very long discussion, obviously. I think we have a question from the floor.
Hi. Yes, please.
Hello. Hi. So I have a question following up what we were discussing earlier, that lithium consumption is increasing, and of course grease manufacturers are moving towards different chemistries and different thickeners. What is your opinion on calcium sulfonate as a replacement to lithium complex? And do you think it has any other downsides, or can it replace lithium complex completely?
It's an excellent alternative as long as it's hot. If it's wet, if it's highly loaded, so we talk about paper industry, steel industry, these kind of heavy industries, it gives a much better lubrication than the lithium complex, I would say. But the further you go down in temperature and up in speed, the more problem you see with the calcium sulfonate complexes. So there is a drive among formulators to try to make it a one-to-one solution, but as of today we have very much higher amount of thickener in this product, and this makes it dry at lower temperatures, so the friction actually goes up. So I wouldn't recommend calcium sulfonate complex grease in an electrical motor that moves anything but very slowly, right? Because you're going to get higher friction unless you have high temperature, because then it's going to release oil, so it helps the situation. So it's not a very good counterpart at lower temperatures and higher speed, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? We have a few more minutes before we go to the next presentation.
All right, by that, I thank you for your interest and hope you found some value in it at least.
Thank you so much, Mikael. So we're going to start in a few minutes. Our next presentation is on metalworking fluid conservation through education. Our speaker is Justin Geach, Global Director of Marketing for